Well, I want to welcome everybody to the May 6th Town Hall meeting here. My name is Wesley Tucker. I will be your host, and Druba DeCall will be your co-host. I really want to appreciate or say thank you for everyone joining us today. I think we have an excellent lineup of topics this month. I think that you're really going to enjoy. One of the things that I always want to, remind everybody that these are being broadcast simultaneously to YouTube. So if you do happen to miss a week and can't be on at noon on Thursday, make sure and go back and watch the video, as well as go back and on some of the previous weeks that some topics that you really liked and enjoyed that you want to go back and rewatch again. We've got some really, really good videos out there, folks, that I want to encourage you to share those with your friends and neighbors and help us get the word out that these resources are out there so more people can enjoy them. Druba, as I said, is the co-host today, and he has changed his name to Ask Questions Here. So feel free to put questions in the chat. That's what makes this really an interactive experience. Put your question into everyone so that everyone sees it, or if you want to do it anonymously, just go to the one that says Ask Questions Here, and it'll go directly to Druba and not to anyone else. And just to real quickly talk about our agenda today, it's pretty much the same as normal. We're going to start off with Dr. Pat Guinan giving us a weather report and then move on into our topic for the day, which is livestock markets 1 year after COVID-19. So I am going to turn it over to Dr. Guinan. I really am tickled to death to see today's drought monitor that once again, Missouri looks really good. So I think we have to give a lot of credit, all of that, to Dr. Guinan. He's keeping drought out of Missouri, right, Pat?
That's nice of you to say, Wesley, but just consider me a messenger when it comes to the weather report and the drought conditions. But you're right. We're looking pretty good, especially compared to a lot of other states where it's just, especially the western half of the U.S. And I'll show that map in a little bit. But thank you, Wesley. Good afternoon, everyone. On the left, we'll see where we've been over the past week. It seems like we've seen these alternating weeks of above normal temperatures. And right now we're slipping into one that's going to go below normal with some cool temperatures anticipated for the weekend and as we go into next week. But you can see on the map on the left how mild conditions, especially at the end of April and in the first few days of May, they've been averaging here in Missouri generally 1 to 3 degrees above normal over the past week. A little bit more cloud cover and rainy conditions in southern Missouri, so they're a little bit more seasonable, near averaged over the past week. And you can see on the right the rainfall over the past week. The majority of the rain that did occur impacted the southern half of the state. A little bit more scattered activity across those northwestern counties, generally from St. Joe to near Unionville. That's where the heaviest corridor was for that part of the state. But those greens indicate anywhere from 1/2 to as much as 1.5 inches. Much wetter conditions in southeast Missouri down in the Boot Heel, very wet conditions. They reported anywhere from 2 to more than 3 inches of rain over the past week. And I do want to highlight, or I just want to note, we all know the scattered nature of showers and thunderstorms, but look right here in Vernon County. Look at that little bullseye. That was an actual system on Sunday that sat right over just to the north and east of Nevada, and that dropped 3 to as much as 6 inches of rain. I know we had a CoCoRaHS report just northeast of Nevada. They had 3.5 inches, and that fell over just a few hours. So highly unusual just to see that localized impact, but it does happen in Missouri and even in the month of May. So other drier conditions across northern Missouri, and I'll show that a little bit later. But I wanted to show as well the pasture and range conditions, since we're well into the growing season now. And on the left, upper left, these are the percent in good to excellent conditions. So the greener those states are, the better when it comes to the percent of good to excellent pasture and range conditions. And you can see Missouri's looking pretty good. 74% of the state reported good to excellent pasture and range conditions. That's an 8-point increase from the same time last year. So Illinois is looking pretty good. Parts of the Midwest, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, even down in Alabama. But what we need to look at is what's going on in the western half of the country, especially the northern plains. Texas, not a good situation because of the ongoing drought that's impacting much of the area. On the upper right, just to put this in perspective, this is about a 2-decade look at pasture and range conditions across the U.S. On the left is the start of the growing season, and as you progress through the season, what the conditions were like. And right now, the 2021 growing season is starting with 47% of the U.S. where those rangeland and pastures are poor to very poor condition. That's the worst it's been at the start of the growing season. You have to go back to 2013, which because of what happened in 2012, we had some carryover. It started out pretty bad, but of course, 2013 turned out to be a fairly wet and cool spring, and so conditions improved, but not a good start for the U.S. as a whole when it comes to these pasture and range conditions. We'll have to keep an eye on that. And as Wesley mentioned, this is the new map that just came out this morning, the drought monitor map showing that drought impacting much of the western half of the U.S. Extreme drought situations, the northern plains, North Dakota, parts of South Dakota, eastern Montana, the Southwest, just not a good picture in regard to those current conditions. They are seeing impacts, hydrological and ongoing conditions because of the dry soils. It's just not a good situation. Hopefully we'll get a pattern change to bring those wetter conditions, but right now it's not looking good. Even parts of the Corn Belt extending from Iowa into southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, into Michigan, parts of northern Ohio, they're abnormally dry, and we're actually seeing some abnormally dry conditions poke their way into the Iowa-Illinois border and parts of northwest Missouri, where over the past 30 days, some counties in northwest Missouri have seen less than 2 inches of rain. That's about 50% of normal. Soil temperatures have reacted nicely over the past week, especially with the warmer weather. These are on the far left. These are the average 2-inch soil temperatures under bare soil, generally in the low to mid 60s statewide, even some upper 60s in parts of the southeastern tip of the boot heel. This middle image shows the red line. Again, look at the up and down nature of these soil temperatures. They're, of course, reacting to the air temperatures. And so we had a cool period during the second week and third week of April. Things warmed up, and now they're starting to dip down again. The blue line is the average 21-year mean of soil temperatures here in mid-Missouri. And then on the far right, these are the current soil temperatures from about a half hour ago, generally running into the 60s, low 70s in southeast, and in the middle 50s across north central and northwestern Missouri. We do have a cold front that's moving to the state as I speak. This is a radar picture. It's in southeast Missouri. We have had some showers and thunderstorms break out in southeastern Missouri. They're on their way moving southeast and southeastward. We'll be exiting the state by later this afternoon. I will note that there is a possibility of some isolated severe storms in far southeast Missouri that could bring some quarter-sized hail and some strong winds. So that's something to be watching and putting an eye in the sky for some of the southeastern parts of the state that still might see some isolated severe weather. We are looking like a much wetter pattern setting up statewide as we go into the weekend. These on top are the maximum temperatures forecast for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and minimum temperatures on the bottom here for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If I had to pick a pick day for the week, tomorrow looks like a pretty nice day statewide. Highs in the upper 60s to lower 70s. There is a system that will start impacting western Missouri as we go through the afternoon, late afternoon, and tomorrow evening, where we could see some scattered showers break out. But I think the big show is going to be Friday night and on into Saturday and Sunday. The high temperatures on Saturday, this are indicating highs only in the 50s, low 60s in northern Missouri, where they'll be south of the warm front across southern Missouri, much more seasonable weather, highs in the mid to upper 70s in southwest Missouri. The warm front is going to settle itself right across southern Missouri. So by Sunday, look at the temperature gradient, highs only in the 50s in northern Missouri, 60s mid-Missouri, and then low to mid-70s across southern Missouri. Of course, when you have a boundary like that, that creates instability, a higher likelihood of showers and thunderstorms, and moisture will be in place to provide that opportunity for widespread rainfall. Low temperatures tomorrow morning start out cool in the upper 30s and low 40s, generally sticking in the 50s for Saturday and Sunday morning. This is a forecast of precipitation over the next 5 days. the majority of this rainfall will occur over the weekend, and you can see Missouri is a bullseye. Unfortunately, the Northern Plains looks like they'll be missing out on most of the rainfall, which is expected to impact Missouri on eastward through the southern half of Illinois, southern half of Indiana into southern Ohio, anywhere from 1.5 to 2 inches perhaps of rainfall over the next 5 days. There is a 1-inch contour that impacts southern Iowa, southeast Nebraska into eastern Kansas. So much of Missouri will, at least according to this forecast, anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inches, perhaps even 2 inches over the next 5 days. This is a forecast over the next 6 to 10 day outlook. So that'll take us into next week. Look at these blues right here. The deeper that shade of blue, the higher the confidence that forecasters think that this forecast will verify. They're indicating pretty high confidence that we will continue to see these below normal temperatures through much of next week. And so typically this time of year, we see highs in the lower to mid 70s. So looking at this forecast, it looks like temps next week will be struggling to get out of the 60s for highs with lows in the 40s. And on the right, this is indicative of a somewhat unsettled pattern to continue. Above normal precip forecast into the Central Plains, impacting parts of western Missouri. Even with a near normal precipitation forecast, that still translates to about 1 inch of precip, because climatologically, we are in the wettest time of year. The month of May for Missouri is our wettest time of year. So Wesley, that's pretty much a weather report. I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. I really appreciate that. As always, very informational. I do think Missouri just has a better climatologist than those other states, and so that's why Missouri is not experiencing drought.
Thank you for saying that.
That's putting a little bit of pressure on you to keep it that way.
That's right. Yep. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Now we're going to turn to our topic for this week, which is livestock markets 1 year after COVID-19. I want to introduce Dr. Scott Brown to you. Scott is really doesn't need any introduction. He's our livestock economist here in Missouri. Goes by a lot of different titles, but whenever we need livestock outlook and a discussion of the markets, he's always the one we turn to. And I think this is a really good time to have this topic because the committee, was looking at this is essentially 1 year after the major market disruption of COVID-19. So we're anxious to see what Scott's going to tell us about the markets. Scott, I'll let you go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Thanks very much, Wesley. I hope as you gave credit for the good weather to Pat, that you do not give me credit for the low cattle prices that we see today. So please try not to do that. All right.
Well,
so
what you tell us, Scott. So you better do
well, if I could only pick where they would go, so I think Pat actually is able to affect the weather, whereas I'm not sure I can affect cattle markets. So he has a leg up on me here. But I appreciate the chance to visit with everyone this afternoon, and I'm going to take a little different approach than normal, just trying to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and some of the things that we've seen in markets as we, look ahead. And I think it's important to go back here just a little bit to look at 2020 and the initial effects back in March of a year ago. And Wesley, you're right. We kind of sit here this week with slaughter a year ago at its worst, if you will, in terms of the slowdown, shutdown situation that we faced. But those impacts still affect us today. I want to spend some time on the demand side. I think there's a lot of positives that we're seeing on the demand side, but it's tough to sort out. We haven't had a pandemic to think about the effects. So I won't say that we have this all figured out, but certainly worth some discussion. And always, of course, what are the clouds that we see ahead? You see some of the points here about what happens when we maybe see government stimulus go away, what happens on the demand side. And, by the way, we have very high feed costs right now, and things like African swine fever continue to create uncertainty. And as we talk about COVID-19, it's hard to sort out all of the effects that we have going on. So I wish I was good enough to actually separate out COVID-19 from everything else. Just to look a little bit here at what we came through. So if we think about the top three lines here as cutout values or box beef prices in the case of beef. Back in 2020, you look January 1st through mid-March, so kind of pre-COVID, we were talking about a choice box beef price that was about $2.10 a pound. By mid-March through mid-June, and the worst of the slowdown shutdown, we got to $3.10. As we saw slaughter capacity come back, we lowered those and ended 2020 in that $2.16 a pound range for choice box beef. And now as we look at 2021, we've been back on the upswing. I think we hit $3.07 this morning in terms of a choice box beef price. So a lot of strength, and I'll say demand now driving, not supply driving. So that 310 we got was very much driven by what we were doing on the supply side, but we're seeing some really, I think, good demand, wholesale retail level for all of these meat products. And it shows as you look at, I don't care, beef, pork, or chicken here, some higher prices. Now, we're going to have to be careful in our comparison to 2020. We often talk about changes relative to a year ago. You look at 2021 year to date on the very right-hand side of production, so beef production up 7.4, pork up 3.7. We were already in this downturn in 2020. So our point of comparison makes those production numbers look up, even though we're not talking about all that much difference. It's just the point of comparison that we have. If we look at wholesale prices on a monthly basis, which is what we have on this graph, you see the first spike in the 2020 observation there of, again, what was nearly $4 a pound choice box beef and $1.08 or so on the pork cutout value. Those came down pretty quickly, again, as we got through the worst of the slowdown shutdown on the processing side. And now you look at what's been happening in 2021, 4 months of data here sitting in front of us. Number one, pork markets took off. Consumers like things like bacon, is what we're finding in some of that data. But also boxed beef prices have taken off. And again, you look at daily and we're talking about $3.07 a pound this morning, I believe, on choice box beef. So we continue to get strength there. If I focused on a slide here for a minute and said, let's not forget this. All right. So off the left-hand side, prices received by farmers, the black line. Off the right side is the CPI for food. You look at kind of what happened after COVID-19. We've driven a wedge between those prices. Now, you notice the black line has been coming back towards the gold line. So prices received by farmers is for all commodities. Corn and soybeans and many of our crop side has been what's driving that black line higher the last several months. If we just had livestock prices received, I think we would see that wedge still there. I'm concerned about the wedge remaining for a period of time as things like social distancing in meat processing plants continues to unfold, that we have that cost built in. And does it go away at some point? Again, my concern is, what do we do at the retail side? We push prices higher. What do we do at the farm side? We push prices lower. So that wedge makes our products more expensive for consumers, yet we get less of that dollar of consumer expenditure at the end of the day. So if we keep those kind of costs in front of us, I worry. And again, you look at this graph historically, CPI for food and prices received by farmers, they move very nicely together for the most part. There are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, they move together very nicely. And COVID-19 has certainly changed that. from a 30,000 foot view for a minute, I sometimes sit here and I go, boy, we're opening in many parts of this country. And I think you would find some parts where people will say, we don't have COVID-19 or it's over. I just remind us globally, it's not over. Places like India have been suffering immensely with COVID-19 outbreaks. I'm not predicting an increase here in the US, but if it were to occur, it could derail what's some pretty good demand strength that we've been seeing of late. So let's just not forget that this global pandemic has not come to a close. I like to look at what we're doing in terms of customer traffic. This is sit down restaurant foot traffic. So I've gotten a lot of questions about how's this data based, and I'll say, so it's cell phone folks that have opted into cell phone coverage that are creating the lines that you see on the graph. You see what happened in 2020, the orange line there, as we saw a almost in half in terms of food service. It's why some of the meat products that we talk about suffered price-wise, because there was no alternative. They were destined for food service. Food service shut down. It was hard to get those products to switch to the grocery store side immediately. So we saw the big turn down. We saw recovery through early July, and then we've been actually fairly flat. And I think that was kind of the next wave, if you will, of more cases coming that kept us fairly flat. But you notice 2021 now, the blue line. We're almost back to 2019 levels. I think demand has been really good. Consumers have said, I'm ready to get out and I'm ready to go eat out. I'm ready to go have a good meal. Those things have all affected what's been stronger demand and pulled on the food service side. So it's been a nice start to the year. If you look at now supermarket foot traffic, you see early in 2020 there where we saw a bounce up as I go, that was the stocking up period, the level of uncertainty. Folks, consumers not knowing what was coming, saying, I'm going to fill my freezer, however small it might be, and I want some meat in that freezer. It helped us in terms of things like pork loin. I used to say all the time to pork producers, what's it take to get loins above $1? If I'd have known the answer was COVID-19, I wouldn't have been asking that question. But there was a lot of changes in terms of demands for products. You see that customer foot traffic to supermarkets went down as we continued through 2020. I think this is where this data has maybe a little bit of an issue in terms of that pickup of groceries where we're buying them online, I think has affected some of what you see in that line as we go through the remainder of 2020. But again, a little bit of strength here is we look at the 2021 data. We're not back to 2019 by any stretch, but some growth again as folks were ready to get out, ready to be done with COVID-19. I think that helped on the demand side as well. On the feed cost side, I don't think any of us anticipated, I remember back to August and you would have looked at USDA's estimate. I believe it was 320 corn perhaps for the 2021 year. And as the crop continued to shrink and export demand continued to grow, we're now looking at USDA a projection of 430. Now that's the March WASDE. April WASDE stayed at 430 as well. I just remind you that for me is my worry. It's hard to know where we go. I say if Pat Guinan could give me a good forecast of how much rain we're going to get across many of the crop growing regions for the remainder of this year. If we put a good crop in the bin, and I say that maybe we plant more corn and soybean acres than USDA gave us in prospective plantings. Maybe we get above trend yield at the end of the day, but we put big crops in the bin. I think we will bring feed costs lower for us. Any real cut in supplies of corn and soybeans because of yields and or not getting things planted could be problematic even to where we sit today. So it's a tough call. I'll say feeder cattle prices in particular. Let's hope we don't have $7 plus corn come this fall, as feed yards are going to struggle with what they're willing to pay for feeder cattle as we continue to see this ramp up. I hear a lot of anecdotal of folks not being able to find corn. At the same time, I hear others who will say, yeah, I still got a lot of old crop corn sitting around ready to go. But this is a big issue for us, and certainly has been a cloud we didn't anticipate just a few months ago. So to COVID-19, a few things, so I like to talk about the hog side here. Calculated hog death loss for a minute. So what's this line mean? So we know from USDA estimates, inventory of hogs, we know how many pigs were born, we know what hog slaughter was, and we know ending inventory. So we can kind of back into how many hogs must have died or something happened to them. It could be measurement error, anything here. But you see that quarter in 2020 where we were above 4.5 million. We would probably expect a portion of those were euthanized animals. It's interesting to me, the last information we got out of hogs and pigs pushed us back above 4 million head. I think that's why we've seen some more positive prices on the hog side. Supplies are tighter than we would have anticipated. I'm not sure what pushed us back above 4 million head. It could have been disease issues, things like PRRS and PEDV that affected what was going on. I sometimes wonder if we aren't getting a little bit of lag of, you think back to 2020, and I encourage all of you to think about euthanizing market-ready hogs. That's not a very fun endeavor, and I think a lot of folks may have taken care of aborting sows or euthanizing baby pigs, of which don't have immediate effects, but now have longer-term effects that we're dealing with today. But that's how the pork industry, I think, tended to deal with the slowdown, shutdown of processing plants. It wasn't like what we can do in cattle. So if we, look at cattle, black line being 2020, you see March and April where placements were well below year ago levels. We kept cattle back on grass as there was so much uncertainty about what was going to happen. We've come back in 2021, and again, we're going to have to be careful about the comparisons month to month. But 2 million head of placements in March got us back above year ago levels and above the 2015 to 2019 average. I'll keep saying we've got a lot of cattle to deal with. I think that's part of our lower cattle price scenario that we're looking at. We'll see where placements go as we move forward, but we really slowed cattle by keeping them on grass longer. And I think we're beginning to pay the price, if you will, for some of the things that we did a year ago, holding cattle up. So we didn't talk about euthanizing those cattle. We just slowed them down. It is nice to talk about a 6-day rolling average that's close to 110,000 head of cattle. As you look at the gold line 2021, that compares to the low that we saw back in 2020 of about 72,000 head there at one point for a 6-day rolling average. A couple of things here. Let's hope we don't go back to repeating that slowdown, shutdown. I think the processing and packing industries changed a lot and have adopted a lot of COVID-19 protocols that certainly help them. The gold line relative to the black line, we're slaughtering a lot of cattle. We've had big Saturday cattle slaughter runs. So I know there's been a lot of concern about where fed cattle prices are relative to boxed beef prices. That discussion should go on, but I don't think packers have to bid very hard to keep shackle space fairly full, and that's been one of the issues we've faced. But you look back at 2020, and I keep reminding us, if you would have said we're going to lose roughly 35,000 head of average daily slaughter, could we do it? I think the industry would have said no way. It's amazing how resilient we've actually been. through what was a very tough COVID-19 year. Now, so some of the other implications, we keep weights high. It's nice to see 2021 weights that have been close to year ago levels. Perhaps higher feed costs are creating some of the weights returning to year ago levels, but we've had a lot of heavyweight cattle to deal with as we fight through COVID-19 and the fact that we've held those cattle longer. I think $7 corn can certainly help us keep cattle weights in particular below year ago levels. So to the positive here for a minute, if you look at 2014 through 2020, we went from what was really an 86 billion pound production level of beef, pork, and chicken very quickly to 100 million pounds by 2020. 2021, we're not really calling for a large increase. So for the first time in several years, we've turned that down. I think that's the optimistic side of this. And I think pork's taken advantage of that. And if you look ahead, we'll say even for 2022, not a lot of growth. That's a nice change on the supply side and can help us from a price side. The overall gross domestic product matters in this discussion. You look back at the 2008, 2009 period where we used to talk about how bad that was, pales in comparison to what happened to real GDP in 2020. We expect some pretty strong recovery, which is helpful for us. More dollars in consumers' pockets at some point will be helpful. But what a marked effect COVID-19 had on real GDP. So what concerns us or what confuses me? If you look at real GDP again, so that previous line now in percentage change, we lost about 4%. Yet real disposable income in 2020 was up about 6%. Why was that? Government stimulus, right? So the checks that we sent out helped offset what was lower GDP. You look at 2021 and the combination, so we get some recovery in GDP, but real disposable income, although growing, most forecasts setting about 3%. It's down from that 6% of 2020. What's that mean for consumers? And I sometimes say if we continue to see stimulus go away, do we at some point see consumers with less money in their pockets? And what's that mean for meat demand? Now you look at the 2022 numbers here for a second, and you see real disposable income down 2% in 2022. So there's still that call from those doing macroeconomic projections that we can in fact see that scenario play out. So we want to keep our eye on what that means for consumer demand. Another way to look at grocery store demand versus food service or restaurant demand, the black line being that food service side, you see it was down about 6% in 2020. Grocery store demand up about 6%. That flips in 2021, where we got a little bit of growth in both of those. But how this changes back to maybe more pull from the from the food service side will be interesting. And for me, what's that mean for farm level prices as well? What's grocery store strong demand relative to food service strong demand mean for ultimately farm level prices? Again, we haven't done these kinds of things before, so it's hard to say. Here's stimulus. So I sometimes say maybe I'm too old to have to worry about this, but at some point somebody has to pay for what's much larger deficits and debt in this country. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't have done stimulus, but relative to GDP, that's a pretty marked increase that we saw. And another follow-up here in 2021 as we go back to maybe more historical levels of government funding. What that does is certainly important. Now, so maybe graph too complicated. So ratio off the left-hand side, so not the level, but we're looking at the primals relative to the box beef value. So for example, you look pre-COVID and things like ribs were running about 1.6, 1.7 of the overall box beef price. So more value in those things, more value in loins, less so in things like chuck and round. So we can think round products here. But when we got in COVID-19, We saw, again, chucks and rounds increasing, and we were losing that high-end demand in those few months through here. But now as you look forward, and I just get us into 2021, we're seeing very strong loin demand. To me, that's food service, high-end restaurants coming back. That's generating some value there. And we've been losing a little bit now back in the chuck and round side as maybe a little less focus there from food service. Pork, similar. You look back at the worst of COVID-19 in pork, and I say bellies hurt, so bacon hurt. If you think about bacon demand in particular, you had a lot of food service who were taking 10-pound packages of bacon on the food service side. Those 10-pound packages didn't really have a home on the grocery store shelf when we think about a pound packages being what is there. But you look in 2021 and what's been driving higher pork cutout value, what's been some very strong bacon prices continues to be important. And we've continued to lose loin prices here. I'll say consumers fell in love with loins again at the grocery store, but those prices relative to the overall cutout value have continued to move lower. Export markets matter here. We've had some very strong growth. China's very responsible for a lot of the growth. The gold line here includes China. You take China out of the picture, and we probably see some growth in some other markets here in 2021, 2022 that's important. But China could still be a big driver for us in 2021. Our dollar has weakened, especially relative to the strength that it saw as COVID-19 really took a hold in 2020. We've been moving it down through the remainder of 2021. Saw a little bit of strength here out of the gate, but we're still well below where we were a year ago. And that helps us. It makes our products less expensive to consumers in other parts of the country. In terms of just a few of the markets that we see, you got Japan being one of our primary markets, actually turning up here a little bit in terms of exports over the last month or so. You see the strength that came from China, blue line here as we were in late 2020 into early 2021, still strong relative to historical standards. Everybody else, this other, you notice how tough it was as COVID-19 took a hold. We're getting recovery in everybody else in the world. Still not where we'd want to be relative to pre-COVID, but in better stead for sure. Let's remember, although production growth is slated to slow substantially, we've changed the amount of meat we're putting in front of consumers. We were talking about 185 pounds back in 2014. Now we're plus 205. So a lot of meat there. If consumers decide they reduce their demand for meat, that could point to lower prices ahead. We're not seeing any signs of that right now, but just given the overall level, I worry about where that goes. As I think about spreads for just a minute, I know this gets a lot of attention. You look back at 2020 and we had an extremely wide spread between farm and wholesale prices. A lot of concern about what packers were doing. I'll leave that up to those in the audience to decide whether fair or unfair, but the costs we're adding dealing with COVID-19, I think, continues to keep a farm to wholesale spread above historical numbers that we have in front of us. I don't see anything changing there. And I will again say shackle space matters here. Packers don't have to bid very hard to keep lines flowing. And I think they have an issue of finding enough labor to keep those plants operating at full capacity. So all that is not helping us in terms of their demand for slaughter-ready cattle. It's not just farm to wholesale. There's also fairly wide margins, wholesale to retail. To me, again, COVID-19 costs, and I hear a lot of anecdotal about these costs are going to continue to go up, that some of these costs have been not passed along from wholesale to retail and will be in the coming months. That could be some added issues for us. Retail meat prices stay high. We've seen some pullback from the very high prices, but we're talking about much higher prices we're passing along to consumers for many products that we have on the graph here. I like to remind us, and I think this has gotten lost. So you look at USDA's projections. So what did they make back in May of 2020? So I go, all right, remember May of 2020, worst of COVID, but they were saying fed cattle prices at $1.09. They've really done nothing but increase those as they've gone from monthly report to monthly report. When you look at what's April of $1.16, a lot better than $1.09. But it's been pork that's been amazing in terms of just how high hog prices have gone as we've gone through 2021 thus far. And USDA has certainly been racing to catch up to those. I kind of wonder if USDA hasn't gotten a little too optimistic about 2021 barrel and gilt prices, but we'll see how the rest of the year unfolds. And Wesley, with that, I think I stayed on time, and I know there'll be lots of questions this afternoon.
Thanks, Scott. Really appreciate that. Druba, do we have any questions for Scott?
Yes, Wesley, we have few questions for Scott. The first question is, so how do we fix high prices for beef, but low prices the beef producer is receiving? So how do we fix that?
Well, that's a good question without an easy answer, but I'll try to help us here. So I will say one way for us to deal with this problem is we need more capacity in the cattle side. I don't know who's going to build the next cattle processing plant. We do have one on the books in Nebraska that should come online. We've seen a few cases where some are double shifting. We've seen the Tama plant trying to double shift. I just worry we're kind of stuck in this situation a little bit more than we want to be, because building a new plant requires labor around that plant if you're going to build a fairly large plant. And I think a lot of companies maybe interested in that, building a new plant, will struggle with feeling like they have enough labor. But we've increased cattle slaughter the last few years as we are reaping the benefits of increasing cow numbers that we saw through 2019. And so we're a lot closer to being in a over supply situation relative to slaughter capacity. Now, we have seen in many states, including Missouri, the investment in small processors to try to help offset some of the effects of COVID-19. All that's great. However, those are small additional capacity numbers, relative to some of the larger plants that we might see. So there's no easy answer to this question. And I frankly more worry about labor as we look ahead. It seems like everywhere we turn now, we know there are labor constraints, but finding folks willing to go into a cattle processing plant and work, I think, gets harder and harder. So that's the simple answer. And I think those that might invest might look ahead and go, well, if I start building a cattle processing plant today, I get it built 2 years from now, is it really going to be needed? We've seen cow numbers slowly moving down, and I think there would be some concern about trying to open a plant with lower potential available cattle supplies a couple of years down the road here.
All right, thank you, Scott. So I also have another question. Wesley, can I ask the second question now?
Yeah, go ahead, Druba.
Okay, so the second question is, why is China's sudden purchase of our corn? So are they rebuilding the swine herd or something else? So why are they purchasing our corn all of a sudden more?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that is associated with what's a rebuilding of the hog herd in China. Now, I'm going to back up for a minute and go, we had both things happening. A corn crop in this country that got smaller as we went through time, and stronger exports. So I don't want to say corn prices are where they're at today completely because of China demand. I think the supply side mattered in this, and as yields were cut, and production was cut, that absolute number was bigger than the growth we've seen in exports now. So we put a big crop in the bin, maybe we can get some lower corn prices. Now, for those of you on that want higher corn prices, sorry, for feed costs, I'd love to see a big crop in the bin this fall. To China, yes, so we do see an increase in the sow herd in China. It's been slow. They have not eliminated ASF in China, and in fact, we anecdotally see stories where there's more cases of ASF recently. I think that could affect their appetite for more corn as we move forward. But predicting ASF outbreak in China is equally a tough strategy. But it's, again, been a marked change. I might remind us that China might turn to other places as well. I think the Ukraine Black Sea crop generally got smaller. That may have affected their appetite for more U.S. product. And of course, the phase one trade deal that we talked about a year ago is important as China's trying to buy more U.S. products. I don't think that we get to this fall and talk about corn prices back where they were in August of 2020. But again, a big crop in the bin, I think, certainly takes some of the luster off of corn and soybean prices if we get big crops for both of those.
So I also have another question for Scott. The slide you showed with U.S. corn supply and use had corn price projected at $4.30. December futures on CME are $6.25 right now. So why that discrepancy?
Yeah. So good question. So that projection is for the 2021 crop year. So it's for the crop that we harvested last fall. Those cash prices last fall would have been lower. And we marketed a fair chunk of the crop probably in 2020. So I think that's one reason why we see that 430. Now, to your question, new crop corn futures have been 70, 80 cents below old crop futures. I think a lot of folks are still holding out for what will be a bigger crop this year that will bring corn prices lower as we get closer to harvest. We'll wait and see what kind of yields we get, but that's part of what is going on in terms of those different price quotes that you see. I mean, again, talking about current futures prices for old crop setting $7. That's a far cry from 430, but for a season average price, USDA has been holding at 430. They likely push that higher as we continue in the 2021 crop year a little bit. Again, we'll see where we go from this point forward.
All right, thank you, Scott. Wesley, that's all I have. I have questions for Scott. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Druba. Well, again, if anyone has any last minute questions for Scott, feel free to put them in the chat. Scott, I'll ask one. So you mentioned cow numbers going down. So is that the answer to higher prices? Do we lower cattle numbers to get higher prices, or what is the solution there? How does that affect us going forward?
I don't like that solution, Wesley. Fewer cows certainly give us higher prices eventually. For me, though, we want to be growing these industries, right? So we want to grow the cattle industry going forward. And you know, we have, how do we have very high consumer prices relative to where we're at the farm. So it tells you there are costs through the system. Part of those COVID-19, part of those coming from other issues like just slaughter capacity. Sometimes I say, how do we better coordinate the cattle industry? I think hogs has done this a little better, and you may not like hogs, and I don't say that trying to say one is the right approach relative to the other, but we're pretty independent on the cattle side, and we have a lot of different players. I do think at times there's a struggle about who gets the next penny from the consumer, and everybody has their hand out trying to pull that dollar. And the very bottom of that is cow-calf producers. And so perhaps better coordination helps us, but we'll see.
There definitely is not an easy answer, is there?
There is not. So the question I saw in the chat box about like the Grassley bill or the Deb Fisher bill about cattle pricing, and does that fix our situation? I do struggle with that answer. So let me take it this way. More negotiated cash trade of fed cattle gets us better price discovery. All right, let's not forget that piece. So as we have less negotiated trade, there should be more concern about whether we have adequate price discovery. I did not say that we don't have adequate price discovery today. That is a very difficult concept for an economist to answer. I think that's gets tied up in courts right away if we aren't careful. However, if you mandate minimum negotiated trade, I sometimes use the dairy industry and go, I sometimes don't think the dairy industry is all that excited about the pricing mechanisms they have in place. So getting the government involved in mandating negotiated trade has pluses and minuses. And it's maybe the last step I'd like to go, and maybe that's where we've gotten to in the industry. But mandatory minimum levels of negotiated trade will have unintended consequences. I sometimes wonder how AMS, mandatory price reporting that AMS does today, how's that affected? Could I, as a seller of fed cattle, go to a packer and say, let's negotiate on this load of cattle? And oh, by the way, we come up with the same price as we would have come to had we done them as some type of formula based. How does that work? How do you regulate that? So all of these options come with, again, pros and cons.
There is another question in the chat. Scott, can you comment on the supply of DDGs with the corn and fuel prices increases?
Yes, so we're seeing those DDG prices go up as well. There's not great alternatives, right? I see some who are suggesting maybe they're going to feed some wheat for the first time in a long time. The problem that we often face is all these feedstuffs go up in lockstep with each other in terms of the relative feeding value. We were short DDGs as ethanol plants were slowed or shuttered in some cases as we weren't driving very many miles in the worst of COVID-19. I think we're seeing that now behind us for the most part, but I'm not sure we're going to see cheap DDGs be the savior of where we're at right now. As again, I think we have strong pull both domestically as well as internationally on the DDG side as well.
So there was a follow-up in the chat about the Grassley bill and others. So the question came in, I don't know if you want to touch this one or not, but it says, so how do you stop monopolies and price control?
Yeah, so there's no easy answer to that question. For me, this is getting Justice Department involved if that's what we think needs to happen. I will. So I struggle with this as an economist, and I often say this: there are large economies of scale to big meat processing. If you decide you want to go break up the big four, you're the concern about what they're willing to pay for cattle. You might help yourself on price discovery, but as you break them up, let's say we go from 4 to 8, I think we lose some of the economies of scale that we have today. So I don't know what the net effect of all that is. And I don't say that telling us not to go down that road. I want us to be informed that there are big scale economies. There's a reason why I think we've gotten more than 80% of the cattle being slaughtered by 4 packers, and the net of breaking them up could be not what we want at the end of the day.
Well, Scott, really appreciate again you taking the time to come and give us this presentation. As you said, the markets are difficult and there's not any easy answers. I want to remind everyone to go to our YouTube channel and watch prior this one as well as other videos that we have out there from prior town hall meetings. I am really excited about the schedule that we have coming up. Today was Dr. Brown. Next week, we have Dr. Paul Beck from Oklahoma State University going to talk to us about grazing summer annual forages. And then on the 20th, we have Stacy Davies, who is one of the owners of the Missouri Prime Beef Packers down in Pleasant Hope, Missouri, going to be on to talk about their project. And Scott just said slaughter capacity is one of the answers. Can we grow more slaughter capacity? Helps our market as much as anything. And so Stacy Davies is going to be talking about their project. And then in the last week of the month, we're going to be talking about pasture weed control. So again, I want to thank everyone for coming today. Be sure to remember to register for future town halls as well as go watch the videos. Everybody have a great week.